for the purpose of reading the quantity per unit and rate when the user selects a product in the grid. I will place 3 text boxes, which will be hidden. I will give the names of these text boxes as TXT Product ID, TXT Unit, and TXT Rate. Now, I will configure a SharePoint data source that will read the quantity per unit and rate when the product is entered in the text box TXT Product ID. The logic here is to pass the product ID selected in the grid to this text box TXT Product ID and read the rate and unit based on the ID from the grid. I will go ahead and create a new SharePoint data source. Select the list as products. Create a select command. Clicking on the Add button will bring up the screen to configure the select command to read a record from the product list. Here we have 2 sections, query value mappings and query criteria mappings. I will have the TXT unit and TXT rate configured in the query value mapping and TXT product ID as the query criteria mapping to the corresponding columns. In the Manage Execute rule, I will select the text box TXT Product ID as the trigger for this command, so that the quantity per unit and rate is selected from the product list when a product ID is selected. Once I am done with the select command configuration, I will click on the Finish button and close the wizard. Now, I need to pass the product ID when the product is selected in the combo box of the grid. For this, I have to create a rule. Select the grid control and open the Rules panel on the left side of the designer. Here, if you click on the Create Rule, a rule will be created for this selected control. Now, I will add a decision to check the column and focus in the grid. If the second column is in focus, that means it is our product combo box. You can see that it is very easy to build a decision using the expression builder in AppForms. Now, I will add an action to pass the selected product ID from the grid to the text box TXT Product ID. You can find all the controls, functions, variables, operators in the expression builder as separate groups. You need to select the type in this list, and that will populate corresponding items in the second list. When you select a control, you can see all the control properties in the third grid. I can use the function gridGetValue to read the value in the second column in the current row. You can see that the current row property is available for the grid control. I am using that property to configure this function. When the product ID is passed to the text box TXT Product ID, this will execute the select command and bring back the quantity per unit and rate. We need to add another rule after the command is executed to pass these values back to the grid. If I click on the text box TXT Product ID and open the Rules panel, I can see the rule created to execute the select command. Now I will add 2 more actions below this to pass the values back to the grid. To pass a value from a text box to a grid control, I can use the function gridSetValue. I will add the grid name, pass the current row index of the grid as the second parameter, third column for the quantity per unit, and fourth column for the rate. The value will be from the text boxes TXT Unit and TXT Rate. Similarly, I will add the action for the rate. I will add the grid name, pass the current row index of the grid as the second parameter, third column for the quantity per unit, and fourth column for the rate. Now, we can go to the preview and see how the rules are coming along. When I select the product ID from the combo box, you can see that the product ID is passed to the text box, which in turn executes the command to read the quantity per unit and rate. Once these values are passed to the text boxes, we push it back to the grid, and you can see that it's working very smoothly as expected. Now, we need to add a rule to calculate the amount in the grid. So I will go back to the Rules panel after selecting the grid control. We have one decision to check for the second column. I will add a new decision to check for the fifth column, which is quantity. Once the user enters the quantity, I will calculate the amount based on the rate and quantity. This example will help you understand the complex scenarios where we can use a function inside another. I will pause the video and complete the action. I have added the other rules for calculating the total amount, shipping charges, and net amount. I will open the actions to show you the expressions, which is easy to understand. We can now go to the preview to check the form. I will enter the dates, phone number, customer name, address, zip code. When I enter the values in the grid, you can see the rules working and the values auto-populated and the amount calculated. The total amount, shipping charges, and net amount is also working as expected. Now let us go to the lists and check the values saved. You can see that the values are saving to multiple lists with the relationship.